I've always dirtied everything that I found. This ain't no different, so look at you now. And baby, cut yourself loose. Save all the things that I said that night. Playing it cool, but I never got it right.
Hey there everybody, welcome. Talking about teleconverters. So we have the 1.4 Nikon Z teleconverter here. I got this off Lens Rental, and honestly it came with a 2-year warranty for like $17. So you should still get a warranty on used equipment out there. So I think next time I go to buy something, I might be checking prices on Lens Rental instead of just getting a 6-month warranty from KEH or MPV. So first things first, what you got to pay attention to is there's this little thing on the front here. It says, don't put this end into your camera, it's going to hit the sensor. That's basically what that means. So the lens we're using to test this out is going to be the 180-600, and we'll just put that on there real quick, show you how that's done. If you're looking for something specific in the video that has a title, please look down below in the timeline and look at the chapters. The side that has that little logo on it, that goes in your lens first. As you can see, it has like this little part that sticks out that goes down inside your lens. You got to line up the white mark with the white mark on your lens, just like you're normally putting on a camera. Gets on there nice and snug. Has a little bit of wiggle back and forth once it's latched on, but that's the way it's supposed to be. It has a little bit of knurling on the outside here, so if you want to take it off, it's pretty easy to grab, even with gloves. Then you have the lens mount. There you go, put that on your camera. We tested this on the Z9, but just for fitment purposes, we're going to put this on a ZFC. Just line it up with your dot, just like normal. Goes right on there. And it only makes the lens like maybe a ½ an inch longer, so not a whole lot of degradation to handling. And I know I'm going to mess up the weights on this, so I have my cheat sheet right here. So the Z9 weighs 1,340 grams. The cage I have on it is 272 grams. This lens is 2,140 grams. The teleconverter is 220 grams. So when all that's put together, the carrying weight is 3,972 grams, or 8 3/4 pounds. So it's definitely not exactly a small setup whenever you put on a Z9, but I mean, it's only adding 220 grams, so it's really not that much. The outside of the teleconverter on both ends does have a rubber gasket, so it is sealed just as well as any S lens would be sealed. A lot of people have asked, how does a teleconverter affect the stabilization of the lens whenever you have a stabilization of the lens, an IBIS in the camera? And honestly, I can't find any difference in it, and the website states that it should act the same with or without the teleconverter put in. The only negative when it comes to the teleconverter is you lose a stop of light. So the lens goes from a 5.6 to 6.3 to an f8 to an f9 whenever you zoom. So it would be f8 all the way at 180, and then it would be f9 at 600 millimeters. So in a grand scheme, I mean, it's not a huge difference, because I mean, you know, you're shooting wildlife in the middle of the day, maybe an overcast day, you're at a 800 to 1000 ISO. Put the teleconverter on there, you're going to be at 1600 to 2000 ISO. So not a huge difference on modern bodies, but it's just something you have to consider. Whenever it comes to the minimum focus distance with a teleconverter, it does not change. It's still the same at 180, it's still the same at 600. It doesn't change it at all. But what is kind of cool is this lens is a 0.25 reproduction ratio. When you put a teleconverter on, you have to multiply that number by 1.4. So it comes out to a reproduction ratio of 0.34. So it adds a tiny bit of macro capability to the lens. Now, it's not going to like blow your socks off. It isn't going to replace an actual macro lens, because if you have a macro lens and you put a teleconverter on a macro lens, if it accepts it, you actually get more of a macro ability to it. It goes past 1:1. It almost becomes like a micro lens. So whenever I go to use this lens, to make it a little bit easier with the teleconverter, since you're kind of zoomed out, so 600 millimeters becomes 840 millimeters on full frame. The programmable buttons here on the outside I remapped those so that I can select 3D tracking by just pushing it. So it'll shift from whatever, you know, autofocus I'm using to 3D tracking. Then if you let go of the button, it goes back to whatever you're using. So I generally tend to use auto area small and then 3D tracking. So if I can't, you know, see the bird in the bush or the brush or anything like that, or the animal, and then I need to like pick through it, I'll switch over to 3D to kind of like pinpoint the animal inside the brush, or I can just manual focus it, of course. So one of the most common questions is, why should I buy a teleconverter if I can just crop in post? Which, I mean, is a valid question. So we're going to compare at the short end. We'll start at 180 millimeters, wide open as you can get. So wide open without the teleconverter is 5.6. With the teleconverter, it's 8.0. So the right side is the crop from full frame, and the left side is full frame with a teleconverter. And I try to get these relatively close to each other. So we'll see how it looks. And also the colors might be a little different because this was outside on a sunny day. So colors might change a little bit here and there. And I didn't edit any of these. Nothing was added to them in post. 100% view. Try and get a little more even. So as you can see, there is a lot more details in the cropped version from full frame that are kind of missing when it comes to full frame with the teleconverter. The texture's just not there. Kind of hard to get them to match up. I mean, you might not be able to tell on YouTube, but it's definitely a little bit sharper on the non-teleconverter version. But it's certainly not like earth-shattering difference here. And I'm sure you can add some of this texture back by just editing it and, you know, adding texture and clarity and maybe clean this up a little bit. Okay, so this is 300 millimeters versus 420. You can see the information up here at the top. 300 on crop is about 450, and it's about 420 with a teleconverter, so it's pretty close. Still more details coming out here on just the crop version, not using the teleconverter. Some of these parts you can definitely see where there's a little bit more fringing going on the lines in comparison. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So about 550 millimeters. Kind of feels like it's the same as before, just not as extreme. Definitely feels like the lens is the sharpest around 200 to 300. Now that we're getting a little further out, I'm starting to think the teleconverter is a little bit sharper than cropping from straight full frame. So we're just going to skip and go all the way to 600. Okay, so we got 600 millimeters in DX mode, so 900, and we have 840 with the TC on full frame. I am a little surprised that the picture from the teleconverter has like a redder tone to it. Could also just been from the sun too, so hard to really rule that out. So just comparing the TC to DX mode, I would say for the most part the DX seems a little sharper, but also with the TC on the full frame, you can feed that into you know, the noise programs like LRC has or from Topaz and get pretty good results from that. And just feeding it a larger file will give you finer details when you go to export it. So here I go over full frame versus the teleconverter full frame. See how they look compared to each other, wide open. The left side is going to be the teleconverter, as you can see up here. Right side is going to be full frame without it. Kind of the same song and dance, a little bit more texture and sharpness in the center. And the corners, it kind of feels like a wash. Not a huge disparity going on here in the corners between the two. I mean, you can tell the non-TC'd full frame without the teleconverter is a little smidge sharper. Kind of splitting hairs at this point, to be honest. Okay, let's go right out to 600 and see what the difference is. I don't really want to go through every single, you know, spot on the lens here. Okay, 600 millimeters on both, and the left side has a teleconverter. Definitely can see the paper texture a lot more in the naked lens. So yeah, overall, just more texture without the teleconverter. And I'm a strong believer you can just add that back in post for the most part. So okay, now let's compare starting from the beginning, the 180 all the way to 600 on the TC versus full frame without the TC at f11 constant. See how it changes. So the left side again is going to be the teleconverter, the right side is the naked lens. So we'll go into the center. F11 does seem to have sharpened it up a little bit. It's gained a little bit of texture back from the paper. Certainly not the worst. I mean, yeah, I feel like it definitely sharpened up the teleconverter at this point at 180. Okay, so here we are at 300 millimeters. Definitely feel like it's handling the teleconverter a lot better when you stop it down. Not that you want to shoot at f11, but the option's certainly there. And I mean, yes, I know we're kind of splitting hairs at this point. This does look honestly pretty convincing for a TC being usable. But if you need, like, you know, maximum texture and sharpness, obviously don't use a teleconverter, but this is working out a lot better than most zoom lenses, you know, work with teleconverters. Okay, let's go to 400. Kind of the same thing, nothing different going on. Smidge more texture in the naked lens. Okay, let's just go to 600 and be done with it. I mean, at 600 they're pretty close. A little bit more in the naked lens, but again, more hair splitting. Yeah, think about this also. This is a 45 megapixel image. You're zooming it 100% at 1:1. So kind of on the extreme side, to be honest. And I just want to point out that I did measure the distance between the tripod and the target. And with the naked lens, to fill the frame with the A3 paper-sized print for the target we have here, I needed to be 8 feet back at 180 millimeters. 300 millimeters was 13 feet. 400 millimeters was 17 feet. 500 millimeters was 20 feet. And 600 millimeters was 23 feet. Now, if you put that in comparison with the teleconverter on the full frame lens, at 180 feet, it was 10 feet. 300 millimeters was 20 feet, 400 millimeters was 24 feet, 500 millimeters was 28 feet, and 600 millimeters was 32 feet. So with using a teleconverter at 600 millimeters, you gain 10 feet to stand further back to capture an image in full frame resolution of a target the size of an A3 piece of paper, which is 11 by 17. So let's just go over some of the pros and cons. No specific order, no pros list, no cons list, just throwing them all out there together. Some things that I've noticed while using this lens is obviously as you are forced to stop down to like f9, sometimes f10 if you want, but at least f9. Any sensor dust on your camera sensor is going to show up. So you're gonna want to get a sensor cleaning swab for your camera, and it's super easy to do. It takes like 15-20 seconds max, and it just keeps those little dots from showing up all over your photos. Some people have asked if it has any effect on battery life, and honestly it's negligible, if nothing. I doubt it has anything to do with battery life. I'm still able to get thousands of photos on the Z9, and it works like you have no teleconverter there. From my experience in the past couple weeks testing this out every day, taking pictures of small little songbirds and everything, the autofocus is just as snappy, just as quick, just as sticky when using bird AF, and it has no effect on that either. It's super responsive, honestly. It has no care whatsoever about the teleconverter being there. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you can run into some ISO noise problems in a photo, especially if you're doing fast shutter speed stuff. As we get a plane flying over us. But when it comes to video, most of the time, it's really not a big deal because, you're already at f9 and you're probably low ISO, low shutter speed, so you don't really need to jack up the ISO a whole lot to get a good image out of it for video. If you have any concerns for having high ISO in your photos, or if you want to sharpen them up a little bit, replace some of the contrast you lose from using a teleconverter, you can use the denoise in Lightroom, or I use DxO Pure Raw 3. That helps a ton in bringing a lot of the stuff back that you lose with using like the center, quarter inch of your glass is a teleconverter, and it just kind of makes every photo as if you didn't use a teleconverter and removes all the noise. So I really do enjoy that program, and if you want to see a tutorial or a review on that, make sure to check it out on the channel. Probably my number one tip for using a teleconverter on your 180 to 600 is if you're photographing a bird, say 15 meters away, normally without a teleconverter. When you put a teleconverter on the lens, you're not going to get to shoot a bird at 20 meters away or 30 meters away. It's not like that much of a magnification. It pretty much just enhances the picture that you would have already gotten at the same distance. That way you're not stretching the lens too far or stretching your sensor too far. If you're not close enough to the subject in the first place without a teleconverter, the teleconverter is not really going to be a band-aid to fix that. You still need to get to the same distance you did before. Probably one of my favorite things about using a teleconverter is video, because as you've seen from the example from the Eagle clip, you get an insane amount of range from a 600mm lens. But the only negative is if there's any amount of wind whatsoever in that video where you're shooting, the vibrations on the lens shaking from the wind, no matter how much you have it tied down, it's going to put little micro jitters in your video, and it's kind of going to ruin the shot. But if it's a nice calm day like today, you're going to get some pretty good footage from 1/8 of a mile, 1/4 mile away from whatever your subject is. Because the Z9 offers that 4K 120 with a 2.3x crop, and it still gives you a 4K footage. So if you needed to, you could still pull stills out when you're editing, and it would still look pretty good and probably be about 8 or 9 megapixels. The other major problem with using a teleconverter, besides worrying about wind or your ISO control, is going to be atmospheric conditions. If you're shooting something 20 meters away, but the ground is really cold and you have really warm sunlight coming down onto you, like right now, you're going to get a lot of heat haze, atmospheric disturbance between you and your subject. It's going to look like jello in the viewfinder. It's just going to be unappeasing, and you would normally have to deal with that anyways without a teleconverter, but using a teleconverter on it, it's just going to amplify that atmospheric distortion you're going to get. So not every day is going to be a teleconverter day. If you see something in the video or have questions about something in the video or the teleconverter, please drop a line down below, ask away. I will get back to you as soon as I can. And I really appreciate all those questions and comments. because you might be asking something that someone didn't think about, and if they read the comments, it might trigger something and help them out too. It's not exactly the best time of year to be doing a review like this, because you're pretty limited to your non-migratory songbirds this early in spring. It is February, even though we probably should have a foot of snow, but it's been like 60 degrees some days, or 20 C almost. But if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and if you're interested in supporting the channel monetarily, there is a group, the Woodland crew. You can subscribe for $2 a month, get behind the scenes comments, footage, community posts, all kinds of other stuff, unreleased videos that are only for community members. So if you're interested in that, check it out. I appreciate it. So until next time, we're all in this together. I'm rooting for you. Best of luck. I'll see you out there.